The rain came down in relentless sheets, cold and punishing against Emma Lane's thin, worn jacket. She clutched her satchel close to her chest, its few contents, a notebook, a half-eaten sandwich, and some coins, her only possessions. The city of Chicago, bustling with life and luxury for some, had never felt more suffocating. As she ducked under a cracked awning for temporary shelter, her breath fogged in the chill of the late autumn evening. She tried not to think about the warmth of a home she'd never have again. It had been over a year since she'd last seen her family, who'd made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her. A year of hard nights, loneliness, and hunger. But Emma was determined not to let self-pity claim her. She wasn't weak. She couldn't afford to be. Her blue eyes scanned the street, hoping for a miracle, a cafe that wouldn't throw her out, or maybe someone who'd need a small task done for a couple of dollars. Nothing. The wealthy pedestrians brushed past her, their eyes fixed ahead, umbrellas shielding them from the rain. To them, she was invisible. Just then, a muffled groan came from the alleyway beside her. Emma's heart leapt in her chest. Fearful curiosity tugged at her. Against her better judgment, she crept toward the sound, her boots splashing through small puddles. There, slumped against a dumpster, was a man. He was soaked through, his dark suit crumpled and stained, and a thin trickle of blood ran down his temple. His eyes were closed, his face twisted in pain. Emma's heart clenched. "Hey! Are you okay?" she called out, her voice trembling. He didn't respond. A surge of panic hit her. He looked like he could be dead. Kneeling beside him, she shook his shoulder gently. His eyelids fluttered, and for a moment she found herself staring into a pair of dark brown eyes, eyes that held a storm of confusion and vulnerability. "You're alive," she whispered in relief. "Can you hear me? What happened to you?" He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a croak. "Help!" Emma bit her lip, scanning the street again. No one even glanced in their direction. This part of the city wasn't known for its compassion. She had no phone and no clue how to get help. But she couldn't leave him here. "Come on," she murmured, slipping her arm under his shoulder. He was heavy, and she was weak from too many skipped meals. Gritting her teeth, she pulled him up, supporting his weight. "We need to get out of here before someone less friendly finds us." It took all her strength to lead him down the alley, away from prying eyes. They emerged onto a quieter street, where the glow of a cheap diner beckoned. The smell of grease and burnt coffee hit her, but it was warm inside and the place was nearly empty. The waitress eyed them warily as they stumbled in, but one look at the man's pale face seemed to soften her stance. "Booth in the corner. Don't make a scene." "Thank you," Emma said breathlessly, guiding him to the seat. He sagged against the vinyl booth, his breathing shallow. She slid in opposite him, her damp clothes clinging to her skin. "You need to stay awake, okay?" she urged, leaning forward. "What's your name?" His eyes cracked open again. "Jake. Jake," she repeated. "I'm Emma. Do you remember what happened to you?" He winced, his brow furrowing as though trying to pull together fragments of a puzzle. I was walking, I think. Someone grabbed me, I fought back, and then... Nothing." Emma's stomach twisted, mugged. "Maybe worse. You're lucky they didn't take more than your wallet." She glanced at his clothes. Expensive but disheveled. Whoever he was, he didn't belong in her world of forgotten souls. A chill ran through her. If he was important to someone, why hadn't they come looking for him? The waitress returned with a pot of coffee, pouring 2 cups. Emma clasped hers, the heat seeping into her fingers. Jake barely acknowledged his cup. "You need to drink," she insisted, pushing it toward him. "It'll help." He gave a slight nod, his hands trembling as he brought the cup to his lips. He managed a sip, color returning to his face. "Thank you," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "You didn't have to help me." Emma shrugged, though warmth bloomed in her chest. "I couldn't just leave you there." "Most people would have," he said, his gaze sharp despite his fatigue. "You didn't." She looked down at her chipped nails, a blush rising to her cheeks. "Maybe because I know what it feels like to be left behind." Jake didn't press for details, but something flickered in his eyes, something that felt like understanding. They sat in silence for a moment, the diner's neon lights buzzing softly above them. Emma's mind raced. She couldn't afford to get tangled up with someone else's problems. Her own life was precarious enough, but Jake was vulnerable, and walking away felt impossible now. "Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked hesitantly. He shook his head. "Not yet, but I'll figure it out." Of course he would. He looked like a man who always figured things out. Still, she hesitated. "I know a shelter nearby. They might have a bed for you." He nodded, finishing his coffee. "Okay." Emma exhaled. Maybe she could help him. Just a little longer. Then they could go their separate ways. He'd return to his world and she'd continue scraping by in hers. She rose from the booth, her legs stiff. Jake followed, his steps steadier now. As they stepped outside, the rain had softened to a mist, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. For a moment, the world seemed gentler. Emma turned to guide Jake toward the shelter when the screech of tires broke the calm. A black SUV swerved into view, its headlights blinding them. Jake froze, his face draining of color. "No!" The SUV door flew open and two men jumped out. Before Emma could react, they grabbed Jake by the arms, dragging him backward. "No!" Emma screamed, lunging forward. A hand shoved her hard and she stumbled to the ground, her palms scraping against the concrete. Through the haze of panic, she saw Jake struggling, his eyes locking onto hers. "Run, Emma!" he shouted. But she didn't run. Instead, she watched in horror as the SUV roared away, taking Jake with it and leaving her alone in the rain. Emma's hands trembled as she pushed herself up off the rain-slicked pavement. Her scraped palms throbbed, and a dull ache spread through her knees. The SUV had vanished, leaving behind only a wet trail of tire tracks. The cold mist settled into her bones, but the chill was nothing compared to the gnawing fear clawing at her stomach. Jake was gone. She could still hear his voice, raw and desperate. "Run, Emma!" But she hadn't run, and now she was left standing in the empty street, alone and helpless. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts as she replayed the scene over and over. Who were those men? Why did they take him? Jake was no ordinary guy, that much was clear. His suit, his demeanor, and now this violent abduction screamed of something bigger, something dangerous. "What have I gotten myself into?" she thought. A sharp pang of guilt stabbed at her. She didn't owe Jake anything. They were strangers, tied together by a moment of happenstance. And yet, a fierce determination hardened in her chest. She couldn't just walk away. He needed help, and no one else seemed to care. Her eyes darted around the dimly lit street. The diner's neon lights flickered behind her, casting eerie reflections on the wet pavement. The city was full of secrets, dark alleys that swallowed people whole, never spitting them back out. Emma clenched her fists, ignoring the sting of her scraped skin. She had to do something. Think, Emma, think. Her gaze landed on the intersection where the SUV had turned. It wasn't much of a lead, but it was better than standing still. She took off, her boots splashing through puddles as she jogged down the street. The mist curled around her, muffling the sounds of the city. Her breath came faster, but she pushed through the ache in her legs. Turning the corner, she paused, scanning the street. Empty sidewalks, closed shops, a few late-night taxis speeding past. No sign of the SUV. Her shoulders slumped, frustration bubbling up inside her. She was chasing ghosts. Wait. Her eyes narrowed at a red glow in the distance. A traffic light. If the SUV had stopped there, maybe someone had seen something. She hurried to the corner, where a small convenience store's lights still burned. A middle-aged man stood behind the counter reading a newspaper. Emma pushed open the door, the bell jangling above her. The man looked up, his eyes narrowing. "You're dripping all over my floor." Sorry," she gasped, her voice shaky. "Please, did you see a black SUV go by a few minutes ago? There were men. They grabbed someone." The man's brows knitted together. "Yeah, I saw it. Weird scene. They peeled out of here like bats out of hell. Turned left down 7th Avenue. Hope flared in her chest. "Thank you." "Hey," the man called as she spun to leave. "You look half drowned. Take care of yourself, kid." She nodded, barely hearing him as she bolted back into the night. 7th Avenue stretched ahead, dark and menacing. Emma's breath fogged the air as she jogged along the sidewalk. Her mind raced as she tried to figure out her next move. She was just one girl, homeless, broke, and out of her depth. What could she really do against men who could snatch someone off the street in plain view? But she had to try. Up ahead, the glow of a street lamp illuminated a narrow alley. She slowed down, her heart thudding. Footprints. Muddy and deep, they trailed into the darkness. She swallowed hard, fear prickling the back of her neck. They went this way. Steeling herself, she crept into the alley. The smell of garbage and stale rainwater filled her nose. Shadows clung to the walls, and every scuttling rat made her jump. She followed the footprints, each step taking her deeper into the maze of the city. Then she saw it. A sleek black SUV parked behind a rusted metal gate. The engine was off, the windows dark. Her breath caught in her throat. She crouched behind a stack of wooden pallets, her mind racing. The gate creaked open, and two men stepped out of a nondescript building. They wore dark jackets, their faces obscured by the low light. Between them, Jake stumbled, his hands bound behind his back, his head lolling forward. Emma's chest tightened. He's still alive. The men shoved Jake toward the SUV, their voices low and sharp. "Boss wants answers." "He's not getting out of this one of them said. Emma's mind spun. Boss? This wasn't some random mugging. Jake was involved in something much more dangerous. But what? She watched as they opened the SUV door, ready to push him inside. Desperation roared through her. She couldn't let them take him again. Her eyes darted around, searching for anything she could use. Her gaze landed on an old metal pipe leaning against the wall. She grabbed it, the cold metal biting into her palms. "You can do this," she told herself. "You have to." Summoning every ounce of courage, she burst from her hiding spot. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice echoing off the alley walls. The men spun around, startled. In that split second, Emma swung the pipe with all her strength. It connected with the first man's knee. He yelled, collapsing to the ground. "Get her!" the other man barked, releasing Jake. Emma's heart pounded as she swung again, but this time, the second man caught the pipe, wrenching it from her hands. His fist shot out, knocking her to the ground. Pain exploded through her cheek, but she scrambled up, refusing to give in. "Run, Jake!" she screamed. Jake, swaying on his feet, lifted his head. His eyes locked onto hers, a spark of clarity cutting through his daze. With a grunt of effort, he charged forward, shoulder-checking the man who'd hit Emma. The man stumbled back, crashing into the side of the SUV. "Come on!" Jake gasped, grabbing Emma's hand. They bolted toward the street, their feet pounding the pavement. Behind them, the men shouted, their voices filled with fury. But Emma didn't look back. Her only focus was on running, on escaping the nightmare closing in on them. They rounded a corner, slipping into another alley. Jake pulled her behind a dumpster, both of them gasping for breath. The adrenaline coursing through Emma's veins made her hands shake. "You came back for me," Jake rasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. She nodded, her chest heaving. "I couldn't just leave you." A ghost of a smile flickered across his bruised face. "Thank you." Footsteps pounded past the alley entrance. The men were still searching. Emma's heart thudded painfully, but the footsteps faded into the distance. Silence settled around them, broken only by their ragged breathing. Jake leaned back against the dumpster, his eyes closing briefly. "You shouldn't have gotten involved. It's too dangerous." Emma's jaw tightened. "I've been on my own for a long time. I know danger when I see it." He opened his eyes, studying her. "You're braver than most people I know." A blush crept up her neck, but she shook it off. "Who are those men, Jake? Why did they take you?" His expression darkened. "It's complicated. I can't drag you into this." "It's too late for that," she said softly. "I'm already in it." He exhaled slowly, nodding. "Okay, but first, we need to get somewhere safe. I know someone who can help." Emma hesitated. Trusting people had never worked out for her before, but something about Jake, the quiet resolve in his eyes, the way he'd fought to protect her, made her want to believe him. "Lead the way," she said. Together, they slipped out of the alley, disappearing into the night. The night wrapped around them like a thick blanket, hiding their movements but offering no comfort. Emma clutched Jake's arm, trying to steady his unsteady steps as they hurried through the deserted streets. His face was pale under the flickering glow of the streetlights, sweat beading on his forehead. Each step seemed to cost him more energy than he had to spare. "We can't keep going like this," Emma whispered, glancing over her shoulder. The city behind them was a shadowy labyrinth, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. Jake nodded, his jaw tight. "There's a place not far from here. Safe house." He winced. "If we can make it there, we'll be okay." "Okay," she agreed, her heart hammering in her chest. The idea of safety seemed like a cruel joke, but it was all they had to hold on to. "Lead the way." They moved in silence, the sounds of the city a distant hum beneath their pounding footsteps. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick, reflecting twisted distortions of their figures as they slipped through back alleys and side streets. Finally, Jake turned into a narrow alley hidden between two dilapidated buildings. He stopped in front of a rusted metal door covered in graffiti. He lifted his hand to knock, but his fingers trembled so badly that Emma gently took over, rapping on the metal with firm, deliberate beats. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door creaked open a crack, and a pair of sharp eyes peered out. "Jake?" The voice was low, incredulous. "Yeah," Jake managed. "Let us in, Dex." The door opened wider, revealing a wiry man in his early 30s with scruffy brown hair and a permanent scowl. He took one look at Jake's condition and stepped aside, waving them in. Emma half-dragged, half-guided Jake inside, her own legs trembling with exhaustion. The door clanged shut behind them, locking out the cold and the danger. Emma took in their surroundings, a dimly lit room that smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. The walls were lined with metal shelves cluttered with tools, boxes, and electronics. In the corner, a threadbare couch sagged under its own weight. Dex crossed his arms, his gaze flicking between Emma and Jake. "What the hell happened to you, man?" Jake collapsed onto the couch, exhaling sharply. "I got sloppy. They found me." Dex's face darkened. "Who?" Jake hesitated, his eyes meeting Emma's for a brief second before he spoke. "Mason's crew. They're working for someone bigger now, someone who wants me out of the picture." Dex let out a low whistle. "You really pissed off the wrong people this time." Emma's head spun with confusion. Mason's crew, someone bigger. She had no idea what they were talking about, but fear gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. She turned to Jake. "You need to start explaining. I've come this far. I deserve to know what's going on." Jake's eyes softened. He nodded slowly. "You're right." He took a shaky breath. "I'm not just some random guy in a suit, Emma. I own a company, and a big one, Talon Industries, but I've kept it quiet. No press, no public appearances. I run things from the shadows because, well, it's safer that way." Emma blinked, his words sinking in like stones dropping into a deep pond. "A CEO? The man she'd found bleeding in an alley was secretly a wealthy businessman?" Jake continued, his voice low. "A few months ago I found out that some of the people working under me were involved in illegal deals, money laundering, black market trading. I confronted them, fired some key players and tried to clean house, but it wasn't enough. They wanted revenge. They've been after me ever since." Dex snorted. "They're not just after you, man. They want to bury you." Jake nodded grimly. "They grabbed me tonight because they think I have information, something that could ruin them. And they're not wrong. I've been gathering evidence. If I can get it to the right people, I can shut them down for good." Emma's heart pounded in her ears. "But they're dangerous, Jake. If they find you again—" "They won't," he said firmly, though the exhaustion in his eyes told a different story. "I just need to rest, and then I'll finish this." Dex sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "You're playing a dangerous game, my friend. And who's this?" He nodded at Emma. "She's the reason I'm still alive," Jake said quietly. "She saved me." Dex's eyes softened slightly. "Then you've got guts, girl. More than most." He gestured to a small kitchen area. "There's food and water. Make yourselves at home for now." Emma nodded, gratitude and exhaustion warring inside her. "Thank you." She helped Jake off the couch, guiding him to a small room tucked behind a curtain. He sank onto a thin mattress, wincing as he lay back. "You should sleep," she whispered. He caught her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Stay," he murmured, his eyes pleading. Her heart twisted. She knew she should pull away, keep her distance, but she didn't. Instead, she sank down beside him, their fingers still intertwined. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't completely alone. When Emma woke, the room was filled with a dim, grey light. Jake was still asleep, his face relaxed but pale. She slipped out quietly, stretching her sore limbs. Dex was at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling through a laptop. "Morning," he grunted. "Coffee's hot. Help yourself." She poured a cup, the bitter scent cutting through the fog in her mind. As she took a sip, Dex spoke without looking up. "You care about him, huh?" Emma's cheeks flushed. "I barely know him." "Doesn't matter," Dex said. "Sometimes you just know who's worth fighting for." She didn't reply. Her thoughts were a tangled mess of fear, confusion, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. A loud bang shattered the silence. Emma's heart leapt into her throat. Dex swore, jumping up. The front door shuddered as someone pounded on it, the metal creaking under the force. "Open up!" a voice barked. "We know you're in there, Jake." Emma's blood ran cold. They found us. Dex's eyes were wide with panic. "There's a back exit. Go, now." Jake stumbled out of the curtain, his face pale but determined. "We're not leaving you, Dex." Dex shook his head. "I'll hold them off. You need to get out and finish this. It's the only way." The door shuddered again, splinters of wood flying as the hinges began to give. Emma's hand tightened around Jake's. "We have to go," she said, her voice breaking. Jake's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Thank you, Dex. I owe you." "Just stay alive," Dex muttered. "Now go." They bolted toward the back exit, the sound of the door crashing open behind them. Voices shouted, footsteps pounded. Fear spiked through Emma as they raced down a narrow alley, her lungs burning. A gunshot cracked the air, and Jake yanked her sideways just as a bullet ricocheted off the brick wall where her head had been. "Faster!" he gasped, pulling her forward. They stumbled onto a main street, the early morning traffic oblivious to the chaos behind them. Jake flagged down a cab, shoving a handful of bills at the driver. "Drive," he ordered. "Anywhere, just go." The cab peeled away from the curb, the city blurring past the windows. Emma's hands shook, tears threatening to spill. Jake's arm slipped around her shoulders, his touch warm and steady. "We'll figure this out," he murmured. "I promise." But as the cab sped through the waking city, Emma knew one thing for certain. The worst was yet to come. The cab sped through Chicago's waking streets, each passing block a blur of motion and tension. Emma's heart raced, her mind teetering between panic and exhaustion. Jake's arm was still around her shoulders, offering a fragile sense of security. He was here. He was alive. But for how long? "Where are we going?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Jake leaned back against the seat, his dark eyes fixed on the skyline. "Somewhere we can finish this." She swallowed hard, staring at his bruised face. Despite the exhaustion etched into his features, there was a steely determination in his gaze. She knew he was planning something dangerous, something final, but she also knew that backing down wasn't an option. The cab pulled up to an inconspicuous parking garage. Jake handed the driver another crumpled bill and nodded. "Thank you." Emma followed Jake out of the cab, her boots splashing in shallow puddles on the concrete floor. The place was eerily silent, the air thick with the scent of oil and dampness. Rows of parked cars loomed like silent sentinels. Jake glanced around, then guided her to a nondescript silver sedan parked in the corner. He pressed a button on the key fob, and the car chirped softly. "Is this yours?" Emma asked, surprised. "One of my backup vehicles," he replied, opening the door for her. "It's untraceable." She slid into the passenger seat, her nerves humming with anxiety. The door clicked shut, and Jake got in beside her, his fingers tapping a silent rhythm on the steering wheel. He took a deep breath, the weight of everything they'd been through hanging between them. "We need to end this," he said quietly. Emma's eyes searched his face. "How?" "I have the evidence. Files, documents, recordings. Everything Mason and his crew have been doing." His jaw tightened. "It's all on a secure drive at my office. If we can get it and send it to the authorities, they're done. No more running." Her stomach twisted. "But they know you're after them. They'll be waiting." "I know," he admitted. "That's why it's dangerous. But it's the only way." Emma's hands clenched into fists. Fear gnawed at her insides, but the thought of walking away was unbearable. Jake had risked everything. He had trusted her, relied on her. She couldn't abandon him now. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady. He turned to her, his eyes softening. "You don't have to do this, Emma." "I know," she whispered. "But I want to." For a moment, they just looked at each other, the world outside fading away. Then Jake nodded, determination hardening his features. "Let's finish this." The drive to Talon Industries was tense and quiet, the hum of the engine the only sound. The sun had risen fully, casting long shadows across the gleaming skyscrapers. The city seemed oblivious to the storm brewing beneath its polished surface. Jake parked the car a block away from his office building, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. "We go in fast. Get the drive and get out. No hesitation." Emma nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. They stepped out of the car, the morning air crisp and cold against her skin. Jake took her hand briefly, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Stay close," he murmured. They approached the building's back entrance, a heavy metal door tucked away in an alley. Jake swiped a key card, and the door clicked open. The hallway inside was dimly lit and silent, the air thick with anticipation. They slipped through the corridors, Jake's every movement precise and deliberate. Emma's pulse raced, the sound of her footsteps echoing in her ears. She fought to keep her breathing steady. They reached a small office tucked at the end of the hallway. Jake pushed the door open and ushered her inside. The room was minimalist, a sleek desk, a leather chair, and a row of locked filing cabinets. Jake knelt by the bottom drawer, pulling out a key from his pocket. The lock clicked open, and he extracted a small black flash drive. "This is it," he said, holding it up. "Everything we need." Relief surged through Emma, but it was short-lived. A voice shattered the silence. "Going somewhere, Jake?" They spun around. The door slammed shut, and Mason stood there, flanked by two of his men. His cold eyes glittered with malice, and a cruel smile twisted his lips. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" Mason sneered. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long. Time to remove it." Jake stepped in front of Emma, his body shielding her. "This ends today, Mason. You won't get away with it." Mason chuckled. "Oh, I think I will. You've got no way out. And you." His eyes flicked to Emma. "You picked the wrong side, sweetheart." Emma's blood froze, but she clenched her fists. "I picked the right one." Mason's smile vanished. He nodded to his men. "Get the drive." The two thugs lunged forward. Jake shoved Emma aside and swung a fist at the nearest man, his punch connecting with a sickening crunch. The thug stumbled back, but the other one grabbed Jake from behind, pinning his arms. Emma's heart pounded. Panic screamed at her to run, but she forced it down. She grabbed a heavy paperweight from the desk and hurled it at the second man's head. It struck with a dull thud, and he released Jake, roaring in pain. "Go!" Jake shouted, grabbing her hand. They bolted out of the office, the hallway stretching out like a tunnel of escape and terror. Footsteps thundered behind them, Mason's furious voice barking orders. Jake led her to the stairwell, their feet pounding down, flight after flight. "Almost there!" Jake gasped. They burst out into the parking garage, the cold air biting at their faces. Their car was just ahead. Freedom was within reach. A gunshot cracked the air. Jake stumbled, a cry escaping his lips. Emma's heart seized in her chest. "No!" she screamed, catching him as he sagged against her. His face was twisted in pain, his hand clutching his side where blood blossomed across his shirt. "Keep going," he choked out. "Don't stop." But she couldn't leave him. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she helped him to the car. They collapsed inside and she fumbled to start the engine, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Come on," she whispered desperately. The engine roared to life. She slammed her foot on the accelerator, the tires screeching as they shot out of the garage. In the rearview mirror, Mason's furious face grew smaller and smaller until it vanished entirely. Emma's vision blurred with tears. "Jake, stay with me. Please." He smiled weakly, his eyes fluttering. "I'm not going anywhere." Hours later, they sat in a sterile hospital room, the steady beep of monitors a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Jake's side was bandaged, his face pale but smiling. Emma sat beside him, her fingers intertwined with his. Relief, exhaustion, and something deeper filled the space between them. "It's over," Jake murmured. "The evidence is in the right hands. Mason and his crew are finished." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You did it. We did it," he corrected softly. He lifted her hand to his lips, brushing a kiss over her knuckles. "I couldn't have done this without you." Warmth bloomed in her chest, chasing away the shadows. "I'm glad I stayed." He reached up, cupping her cheek. "Emma, I don't want to just thank you. I want you in my life, if you'll have me." Her heart soared. For the first time in years, she felt seen, cherished, loved. She leaned in, her lips brushing against his. "I'm not going anywhere." Their kiss was soft and lingering, a promise of a future built on trust, resilience, and love. The storm had passed, and in its wake, they found something worth holding on to, together.